So, talking about the Middle East and kind of centered on the foundation of modern Israel as well. Now, talking about Israel, especially the history of it, we have to deal with the idea, okay, how I particularly feel about it, because obviously there's a lot of huge biases involved in everything to deal with Israel. So, from a mystical point of view, I have no particular feelings along those lines. Uh, I don't believe the Jews have any special right to Israel. I don't think uh, biblical interpretations of Israel being a special place by by the design of God is correct. So I have no mystical stake, no supernatural stake in how the history of Israel comes out. Uh, I look at the history of how the foundation of Israel occurred, and I do see it as somewhat tragic. That said, what is done can't be undone. Uh, they have a right to self defense, a right to exist, just as any other country, regardless of how long it's been there. So that sets that up. So one of the things I like to mention when anything dealing with history is history is not an actual record of events. History is an interpretation of the observations and writings that we have that survive to this day, interpreted in such a way that we can come up with an understandable story. History is not objective truth. So the biggest things we get in the way of understanding the history of the foundation of Israel is uh, there's a thing I call foundation mythology. All countries that have a distinct beginning have foundation mythology. Essentially, nobody really comes up with everybody's view of the history of their country's foundation always looks like some kind of extraordinarily special and good event. Nobody talks about the horrors and awful things that happened at a foundation. The foundation myth is somewhat pure. You can go back to something as hardcore ridiculous as Romulus and Remus for Rome, and you can also go up to things such as the American Revolution, where essentially the period from the Revolution to the Constitution is essentially almost invisible to most Americans because the foundation history was written by Federalists who the revolutionary years are a little bit awkward for. And we have the French Revolution, where many events are essentially orchestrated by an establishment, are touted as being uh, spontaneous peasant uprisings because it fits the mythology. So Israel itself has its own foundation mythologies, so we need to know that they're there and could be intruding on our ability to understand what's going on. Also, we have the issue of religious dogma. Three of the world's largest religions all have some sort of stake there, have stories around what they think Israel is, should be, or was. And we have to deal with the idea that religious dogma also getting in our way of our understanding. So, uh, I like to give lots of background to particular story. So, uh, first thing to understand, because it's important to deal with the background, is the idea of the Bible and how it's generally interpreted. Uh, we have a long history of different biblical interpretations. There's a tendency, if you have a particular belief, you want to believe that the way you believe can be traced all the way back to the beginning of the religion, and nothing has changed in between there, here and there. However, historically, no such continuity of beliefs is recorded. So you may believe it, it may be your faith, but we don't have any historical record that says your way of interpreting things is the way it's always been interpreted. And we run into a lot of problems of why it's hard to make heads or tails of this history. First, we're dealing with people who are long dead, from a society that is long dead. They had a particular way of thinking, they had a particular way of looking at things, they had their own idioms, they had their own background of stories, their own mythologies, all kinds of things built into how they looked at things. So they're not every word and every phrase is fully translatable. Trying to get inside their heads and understand how to make sense of their words and put it into a perspective. In fact, that's a large part of decoding the Bible, is understanding what particular phraseologies meant, because not everything is literal in the way that every word can be said to mean exactly what it appears to mean. Take like a simple American English idiom. When you say, "Oh, that guy is really cool," well, 2,000 years from now, they're going to say, "Huh, why was this person functioning at a lower temperature level than the rest of us?" It's those kind of things that are built into the Hebrew society of the time period of the foundation of Christianity that we'd like to think we got a perfect handle on, but we may not. And some particular interpretations of the Bible do not fully take into consideration these thought processes. And I have to deal with the fact that we started with a religion that was an oral tradition initially. And within a generation, it was recorded, but it also means that not everything comes through exactly the way we want. And then we're essentially taking thoughts and words that started out as probably Hebrew and Aramaic, and then translate them into Greek, which are the majority of the original texts of the Bibles. So you're always going to have glitches worked in, whereas maybe whoever was writing in Greek may not have grasped a particular idiom of that area and translated it in correctly, or they may have put their own idioms in there, and we don't know the difference between whether it was the Greeks throwing an idiom in versus whether they were trying to transliterate Hebrew Aramaic idioms into the Greek, or whether they were direct translations. Well, we also have to deal with various Latin and Greek rewrites over time, and then we have the translation into modern languages. Now, you'll get certain people will be adamant, "Oh, well, we know exactly what the Bible's saying. We're absolutely 100% sure of everything it says." Well, there's something that indicates that there's a possibility you may be wrong, and there's a good chance a lot of people are wrong, because the number of Christian sects numbers in the thousands, at least over 1,000. Uh, some as high as 9,000. And if you get into very liberal interpretations of what a sect is, some of them are interpretations of tens of thousands. I'll settle for thousands. So if there's, and generally each sect is formed because of a different interpretation of the Bible. It could be as little as what's more important than what, and it's also many times a disagreement with what one group has come up with versus another. So if you've got thousands of people with thousands of different interpretations, some of them got to be wrong, and it might be you. So that's something to keep in mind. And this becomes important once we work our way up to the 1800s. One of the things I want to make clear is when I talk about when things occur, I am not in any way inferring that the order of an interpretation makes it legitimate or illegitimate. That's not my job here. I'm not a biblical scholar. So if something was considered a true biblical interpretation in the year 1000, and somebody in the year 1800 came up with a different spin on it, I think it's fully possible the person who did the reinterpretation in 1800 could be more correct than the person who did the interpretation in the year 1000, or vice versa. So I don't see any value to precedence of when an interpretation occurred.